Oh, tripod legs in the image. Oh, I'm such an idiot.
Landscape photography does not mean having to travel the world. Great images can be made locally, it all depends on how you look at a location. This is my friend Brendan. He is a Canadian and a full-time travel photographer. And to him, my local patch is as exotic as the far-flung regions of Southeast Asia. Stick with us as I capture a beautiful photograph before taking you into Photoshop and Lightroom to process the final image.
Okay, so we have arrived at my local patch, my local shooting area, which actually I never seem to photograph. So it's quite nice to come here with Brendan, wherever he is, there he is. It's nice to come here with somebody who's never seen it before, because Brendan gets really excited. I'm just like, oh, it's just St Mary's Lighthouse, which I see every day of my life. But today I am going to try my best to get an image that maybe I haven't shot before, something that's, I don't know, try and make the most of it. I'm going to try and pretend that I too am from Canada and have never been here before. I don't know that's going to work. We're just going to have some fun, maybe shoot 1 or 2 images, and yeah, it is, after all, a lovely place. Tell me, Brendan, what are you doing here?
Just simple shot, taking this edge, using it as a perfect leading line, using some of this kelp or algae as a foreground, and leading it straight into right into the lighthouse. The light's still not great, but I kind of like to develop a couple compositions before the light gets good. That way when the light goes good, I can run around and shoot as many shots as possible.
Yeah, no, this is nice. Yeah. Very nice. Damn, that's what I was going to shoot. No?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to have to go and find something else. So I've just come for a walk down the little beach here. It's quite a small beach because it's high tide. Just looking for a bit of foreground interest and then include the lighthouse in the background. The truth is, dropping tripods. The truth is, because I've just been here so many times, I actually really struggle to see compositions, which sounds bizarre, but it's just one of those things, I suppose. Yeah, there's loads of people over there. There's about 4 or 5 photographers, Brendan, and then loads of families. There's people having barbecues. That's the thing with sunsets in summertime. Always better to do sunrises. Of course, the downside of that is sunrise is usually at 4 in the morning, so it's a tricky one. But yeah, either way, this is a beautiful evening. It really is. Yeah, I think I'm going to go maybe long exposure, or using the motion of the water. I don't know. We'll keep browsing. So after having a bit of a walk around the beach, I have found the composition. It's nice. I was just looking for foreground interest. I mean, you've got your obvious subject, which is St Mary's Lighthouse, which is beautiful on any day of the week, any week of the year. So I wanted to find that foreground element to pull the whole thing together. I've shot the causeway many times, so I'm not interested in the causeway. I just wanted to find something simple, really simplify the scene. Found this rock, this really pointy rock, and the water seems to be hitting it in a way that when the water hits it and then retreats back out, it leaves these lovely fluid movements. Combine that with a ½ second, 1 second exposure, you can get quite a nice image. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just shooting a vertical composition. I've got the pointy rock in the foreground, the waves are lapping over the rock. We've got a lovely subdued purple sky. I've got to be honest with you, it's quite peaceful, and I'm very glad I came out. I don't know where Brendan is. I can't see him anywhere, he's gone. Bikes are still there though, that's the main thing, they've not been nicked. Yeah, I've got a 3-stop medium edge graduated filter. The 3-stop's probably too strong, but I didn't bring a 2-stop. I just shoved a load of stuff in my bag and came down on the bike, so I'm a bit underprepared. Another thing I'm concerned about is I didn't bring my CDs, so when the water washes over the tripod legs, I'm worried they're sinking in a bit, so not all of my images are going to be sharp. The way to counteract that, of course, is just to shoot lots of images, and like I always say, when you're shooting water and waves, it's you really can't control the elements within the photograph, so you know, you have to take lots of photographs, and you know, 1 or 2 of them will be right. You know, you might, oh hang on, sorry guys, wave coming in, here we go, wait for it, yes. Oh, tripod legs in the image. Oh, I'm such an idiot. That's what happens when you try and video and photo at the same time. Oh well. Yeah, lovely evening. Yeah, I've been shooting this scene for about 15 minutes now, just getting lots of images as the waves crash and as the light changes, and oh yeah, I've got a 3-stop ND filter on as well, just to slow down my shutter speed. Yeah, I'm quite certain I have an image that I'm happy with. It's been fun hanging out with Brendan, showing him my local town. And with that being said, I'm going to go back to the office, and I think, because this has been quite a short video, we'll edit that image that I took and yeah, go through the process of that. Right, to the office. So we are now back in the office, and since taking that photograph last week, a couple of things have happened that I'd like to mention in this video before we jump in and discuss how I possibly over-edited this image. We'll see. But yeah, so first thing is, on Sunday I released a video of Brendan. We announced we were running a Patagonia workshop in 2019. That has sold out, so I just thought I'd let you guys know that. The second thing, England are in the World Cup semi-final, which is just phenomenal news, and that game against Croatia is going to be going live about an hour after this video is released on YouTube, so don't expect any replies in the comments, because I'll be watching the football. I'm massively optimistic for England. I think we can go on and win it, but for what it's worth, if Croatia do beat us in the semi-final, though, they are the team that I would like to see go on and win. And finally, a story that isn't really nice to talk about, but I feel I should do my bit and mention it, is you guys may know a YouTuber and photographer called Matt Day. You may know his channel, you may have seen some of his stuff. He's fallen on bad times. He's incredibly ill at the moment. I don't know too many details, only what I've read on his GoFundMe, but it looks like he could have been bitten by a tick, and that's affected his brain and nervous system, and the guy's in a bit of a state. And I think the photography community is one of the better ones out there. I've seen it before where everybody pitches in and supports if something happens to another photographer, especially here on YouTube. And I'd like to think that if something happened to me and I couldn't work and I couldn't take photographs, that people would help out, whether it's like whatever. Anyway, so I don't know much about Matt. All I know is I follow his channel, I see his work. He seems like a top guy. He's got a wife and kids. He's in a very, very bad state. Obviously he can't work, and yeah, he needs help. So somebody has set up a GoFundMe for him, and I'm going to link to it below. Okay, so with all of that being said, I'm going to move on and show you how and why I edited this image. Alright, so let's do this.
So this is the raw file in Lightroom. You can see it's a bit wonky, it's looking a bit flat, but we're going to fix all of that. I don't think I mentioned in the settings, but this is shot at f9, 16mm, and it was a half-second exposure. Because it was shot so wide, the first thing I'm going to do is apply profile corrections, which will get rid of any warping and any vignette. I'm now going to apply a 4x5 crop and just make sure that my horizon is dead straight and allowing a good balance between the rock in the foreground and the amount of negative space in the sky. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm now going to start processing the image. The exposure looks good. You can see my histogram here looks fine. What I am going to do is increase the dynamic range by just pulling back those highlights and lifting those shadows, which gives more detail in the shadows and more detail in those highlights. Of course, the result of this can be a flat image, so I'm just going to increase the contrast. Be careful with contrast, you don't want to go too far, it can look a bit bitty, so you just want to introduce it gently, it's all about being subtle. Okay, looking good. I think the next thing I'd like to do is adjust my white balance and warm it up a little bit. Whoa, okay, that's a bit too much. Let me just bring it back. And yeah, I just want a gentle change, just warm it up slightly. So I just want to add a bit of a pop to this image, so I'm going to adjust the vibrance slider. Be very careful with the slider. If you go too far, it looks ridiculous. So yeah, I'm just going to pull that back a bit. I'm just also going to increase the saturation a little bit as well. Now, the difference between vibrance and saturation is that saturation affects all colours in the image, whereas vibrance only affects those more muted colours. So that's more or less the processing of this image done for now. I'm just going to scroll down to my sharpening. Yeah, and that's my computer lagging massively. I'm going to apply some sharpening. My preset is set to 40, which is fine, but I'm actually going to apply a mask. And by holding down the Alt key, you can see that only the white areas will have sharpening applied to them. That means that areas such as the sky and a bit of the water, they have no sharpening applied to them, which means you don't get any unnecessary noise. Now, looking at the image here, I can see a couple of things I don't like. I'm going to try and change the water is quite bright on this sort of top mid area left-hand side as it reflects the sky. So I'm actually going to get a local brush and select highlights, and I'm going to paint in a reduction in highlights on the surface of that water. There we go. I'll start off at minus 100%, and then I'm just going to pull that back. Remember, everything needs to be nice and subtle. That's generally my motto here. I'm going to add a second local adjustment here, this time with clarity, and I'm going to paint in some clarity just on the white water where it's breaking. You can see here it's going to give it a bit more clarity, funnily enough. But you can see the water's getting brighter, and it just gives it a bit more detail and just makes it look that bit more dramatic. Okay guys, I promise you this is the last local adjustment I'm going to make. This lighthouse here is looking a bit dark, a bit dirty, so I want to clean it up, brighten it up. So I'm just going to again use the brush tool, and I'm going to select exposure. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to tick the box that says auto mask, and that basically means that it will automatically apply the effect only to the lighthouse by some voodoo magic, I don't know how. So I'll paint this into the lighthouse. I've got my exposure nice and bright just so I can see what it's doing, and then I'm just going to reduce that right back. And again, I've said it 100 times already, but it's all about being very, very subtle and discreet with your editing, and over time those will build up and you'll notice them more. So there we go, that's the lighthouse about done. So I thought that I was about done with this image, but after looking at it in more detail, you can clearly see that the lighthouse is on the wonk. It looks like it's being sucked out of frame. It's all distorted and skewed, and that is because I shot this at 16mm at the edge of the frame, and that is where you're going to see all of the warping and distortion. So I need to fix that. The first thing I'm going to do here is create a virtual copy of this image, and I'm going to work on the copy. What I'm going to do in an attempt to correct that lighthouse, which is being sucked out of frame, is I'm going to do some manual lens corrections and just play with the distortion until the lighthouse looks correct and doesn't look like the Leaning Tower of Whitley Bay. So now we can see the lighthouse is actually starting to look quite normal, but unfortunately the side effect of this is that the horizon is looking incredibly curved, which coincidentally is a method people use to try and prove that the Earth is round, when in fact we all know it's flat. And we're in Photoshop and we have both images open as layers. Now I expect you're getting a bit bored of this video now. I know I'm certainly getting bored of making it. So let's just speed things up. Basically I copy a section of lighthouse that I want, I paste it over the image, then I align it up with the original lighthouse so that everything's true and proper. I then create a mask and I basically blend in the new lighthouse on top of the old lighthouse, using a little bit of the free transform tool in order to align the horizon. It's pretty tedious work, but you know, it's very, very simple, and it's just blending and dodging and burning and making sure that that lighthouse nests very nicely in with the original, because after all it is the very same image, the same pixels, just slightly warped. And there we go, that's the lighthouse corrected. I'll click off this layer mask so you can see the difference before, after, before, after. So at this point I thought I was done. Again, I thought I was done. But yeah, I just felt like the image needed something else. It needed something, and that lighthouse was crying out to be switched on. So I thought I'd have a bit of fun with this image, you know, why not? I was kind of in the editing zone. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna switch on that lighthouse. And yeah, that's what I did. So let's do it. All right. Very quickly before switching on the lighthouse, I'm just gonna bring in a bit more saturation to that sky because I felt it was looking a little bit flat. Okay, I'm back into Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate my layer so I have that spare layer, that backup, that failsafe in case I mess this up. So to switch on the lighthouse, I'm just going to add a simple lens flare. A 50 to 300mm zoom seems to have a nice colour, a nice effect. But this is too bright, but I'm just going to position it over the lighthouse anyway, just to get an idea. But yeah, so that is massively, massively too bright. So I'm just going to repeat that process, adding the lens flare, but this time I'm going to go to about 20%, which is, you know, I've said in this video a few times now, it's all about subtleties, and 20% is a nice subtle glow. There we go, it's not quite over the lighthouse where I want it to be, but you know, it's fine. I'm going to fix that without any problems. So what's really annoying about lens flares is that you can't apply them to an empty layer. So you apply them to your layer and you're stuck with it. You can't move it, you can't shift it, you can't manipulate it, except you can, but it's not obvious. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. So I've got my lens flare here, and what I'm actually going to do, and by the way guys, I'm working on a Mac, is I'm going to press Command Z, which is Edit Undo. So I've just undone the lens flare that I've created. Now I'm going to create a new layer. Shift Command N gives me a new layer, and then I'm going to press Shift F5, which basically allows me to fill that layer. So essentially all I've done is I've created a black layer. Now if I go into the filters menu at the top of the screen here, you can see that it says lens flare, and that has remembered the lens flare that I previously applied. So by clicking that, I get the last lens flare applied to the black layer, and all I'm going to do now is change the blend mode of this layer to screen, which will get rid of all the black, and there we have effectively a lens flare on a transparent layer that we can do what the heck we want with. I now need to get that light and stick it exactly on point, right on the lighthouse where I want it. So to do that, I'm just going to go Command T, which is transform, and I'm going to shift my reference point right over the lighthouse exactly where I want that lens flare to be. There we go, and then if I zoom in, I can then just drag my lens flare right over the lighthouse and position it perfectly. Now that tiny lens flare does actually affect the whole of the image, believe it or not. And as you can see, there's some space around the edges as I've moved that lens flare right over the lighthouse, so this is easy to correct. Again, I'm on a Mac, so I'm just going to press Shift Alt and grab hold of the corner and drag that over the image just to make sure that it covers the entire image and there are no borders or gaps around the side. Now let me show you how the lens flare affects the whole of the image. If I zoom in, you can just see there are some artifacts up here and down here, and I'm going to get rid of those. But before I do that, actually what I want to do is change the color temperature of the glow from the lighthouse and see if we can warm that up. To warm up the glow at the top of the lighthouse, it's quite straightforward. I'm just going to add an adjustment layer, which is photo filter, and that gives me the warmth filter. Now you can see here it's applied it to the entire image, which is no good, but what I can do is I can just clip this to the top layer, which means it only affects the top layer, and then if I drag my adjustment layer all the way over to the right hand side, it's going to give my lighthouse a lovely warm orange glow, which beautifully matches the warm orange sky. Now I just want to get rid of those artifacts created by the lens flare effect. Dead simple. Just going to click back on the layer here, layer 2, and I'm going to add a layer mask, and then I'm pretty much just going to paint out everything except for the light at the top of the lighthouse. And yeah, very, very straightforward. Now, I'm not trying to fool anybody with this image, it's clearly not a real light, but you know, you want it to look as good as it could possibly look. So what I want to do, and what there should be, is if there was a light in that lighthouse, there would be a reflection in the water beneath the lighthouse. So essentially, I'm going to repeat the entire process with the lens flare, but I'm going to do it beneath the lighthouse, and then once that's in place, I'm just going to reduce the opacity, and then I am going to drag it lengthways so that it's not a round circle, but it's more of a tall stretched oblong, and that will give me more or less a reflection of the light at the top of the lighthouse. And that is my finished image, how I did it and why I did it. And the reason why I did it is because I just got carried away and it just felt right, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So that's it. That's pretty much it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've taken something away from this video. And if you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing. You know, I produce lots of content on the channel and all that sort of stuff. Good luck to everybody who is going to watch the England game in the next hour. I'm probably in the pub right now. So yeah, very excited for that. And I think I'll leave it there. So until next time, bye for now.